Hi, I'm Jeremy Richmond, the co-founder and CEO of the Aviel Foundation. I'm going to talk briefly about the science of violence and compassion, and the idea that we can prevent violence and build compassion through neuroscience, brain health research, to understand violence and ultimately treat it as the disease that it is, so that we can prevent, intervene, and cure it. Because we have a huge problem, an epidemic of violence worldwide. Believe it or not, 50% of the world's children are victimized violently every year. That's 1 billion of our children. 20% of the developed world's adults are victimized violently every year. When it comes to the United States, it's no exception. In the US, one violent crime occurs every 27 seconds. During the course of this video, that's roughly 22 acts of violence. One murder occurs in the United States every 37 minutes. And one rape every 6.5 minutes. When it comes to violence to self, one person dies by suicide every 14 minutes, and 5 deaths occur due to drug overdose every hour. These are sobering statistics. And I come to you as one of the faces of these statistics. My wife, Jennifer, and I lost our beautiful baby girl, Aviel, when she was just 6 years old, and murdered in her first grade classroom with 19 of her friends and classmates and 6 of her educators on a dark Friday, December 14th of 2012 in the Sandy Hook Elementary school shootings that took place here in Newtown, Connecticut. As you can imagine, this turned our world completely upside down. It began spinning out of control. And in the depth of our grief and sorrow, we had to do something, find some purpose in life to get us out of bed, some motivation to prevent other people from suffering the same way that we suffered and continue to suffer to this day. So we chose to play to our strengths. You see, Jennifer and I are both scientists. I'm a neuroscientist, and I've been in the neuroscience and drug discovery field for over 2 decades. And I know the amazing things that we can accomplish to treat diseases and to prevent suffering if we put our time, focus, and effort and finances into finding and unraveling the causes, the pathologies of our diseases. We need to apply these discoveries and this focused effort when it comes to the brain. We have a number of organs that we're familiar with: the heart, the lung, the liver, the kidneys. And they can be healthy and unhealthy. And we understand that the brain sits on top here to help coordinate the efforts of these organs and their functioning properly. But the brain is very difficult to study, housed up there inside of our skull. And as a result, people are often shocked when they hear that brain science is actually the least explored of all of our sciences. We know more about subatomic particle structures. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about what's between our ears here. And considering that this is the organ we used to consider, it's really ironic how little we know about the brain. As a result, we begin to really mystify the brain and understanding how it works. And it goes up on a magical pedestal. And it's not uncommon to hear people refer to themselves in a dualistic fashion. Here's my meat on top of my feet, but where am I? I'm over here somewhere, separate. But this isn't the case. We know scientifically that the brain is the house, the seat of our memories, feelings, and our behaviors. And this brings us to a big elephant in the room, when those behaviors are violent in origin. On one side of this divisive debate, we have violence. It's all about mental illnesses. And where does this come from? Well, it's not a big stretch to understand that when people act out violently towards themselves, or shoot each other on a street corner, or act out violently by killing innocent children and their teachers in schools, these are clearly abnormal behaviors. Something is wrong with them. On the other side of this debate, we hear the sentiment, people with mental illnesses are more likely to be victims of violence than to be perpetrators. And this is an important sentiment that we understand. It turns out that diseases of the brain are diagnosed based on symptoms or groups of symptoms called syndromes. And we oftentimes give the suffering individuals labels of their disease. This causes fear, shame, and stigma associated with diseases of the brain that ultimately leads to discrimination. And this creates more barrier, fear of people trying to get help for themselves or for their loved ones. And we think that this went a long way towards the problem that the Sandy Hook shooter had, when lots of people knew he was behaving abnormally for many years, but nobody intervened or advocated on his behalf to a point that they could have prevented the horrible tragedy that took place. So let's look at this umbrella of mental illness. A lot of people live under this umbrella. And as a whole population of all the people suffering mental illnesses, we could certainly agree that they're more likely to be victims of violence than to be perpetrators. But we also have to recognize many of the individuals suffering with diseases under the mental illness umbrella can be characterized with violent behaviors. For example, antisocial personality disorder or psychopathic behavior is characterized by callous and unemotional aggression and violence towards others. Many of the other diseases are characterized by an increased risk of violence towards oneself or towards others. We need to back up. We need to remember that the brain is the source of our memories, feelings, and our behaviors. Therefore, abnormal behaviors are the result of abnormal chemistry or structure of the organ, the brain. Ultimately, we need to make the invisible visible. We need to move away from labeling individuals suffering with their disease. You are schizophrenic, or you are depressed, your child is, fill in the blank. We need to make this invisible visible, identify pathologies. We need to build bridges between the biochemical and structural aspects of the brain that are the equivalent of the behavioral problems that we see in the outside world. This is brain health, and this gives individuals hope, something that we can actually address, fix, and identify. We need people to recognize that while they're responsible for their health or the health of their loved ones, it's a matter of chemistry and structure and not character flaws. Ultimately, we need to see violence as a disease that we can prevent, intervene, or cure. And while the brain remains, for the most part, fairly enigmatic and a black box, there are many things that we know scientifically in our environment that we have control over that lead to an increased risk of violent and aggressive behaviors. These are risk factors that we need to eliminate from our environments. On the other side of this equation, there's many protective factors that when they go into this black box, you move away from violence and towards compassionate, kind, and connected and resilient behavior. And we also have the hope knowing that our brains are plastic throughout our lifetimes. Neuroplasticity refers to the brain's ability to adapt and change in response to our experiences. We know that we can certainly help to foster protective environments and eliminate the risky environments that lead to violence. And it's in our capacity to do so, and we actually have the responsibility to do so. It turns out that what makes us uniquely human is our ability to introspect, to control our behaviors, and to help foster a healthy environment. In fact, it's our ability to behave humanely that makes us uniquely human. We need to take this responsibility very seriously. So here we are at the base of Mountain Probable. In the light sides of this mountain are the things that we know we know. In the dark shadows, those are the things that we know we don't know. We know that the brain is the source of our memories, feelings, and our behaviors. That abnormal behaviors are the result of abnormal chemistry and structure. We need to make that invisible world of mental visible by building bridges between the abnormal chemical and structure aspects of the brain and the behaviors that we see in the outside world. We know that there are a number of risk factors in our environment that are in our control to eliminate, and that we can foster protective factors, and we have the hope that we can get people help because our brains are plastic throughout our lives, particularly while we're young. And we know that we have the responsibility to take this on very seriously because what makes us uniquely human is our ability to be humane. We also need to recognize that Mountain Probable is just the tip of the iceberg. We need to poke our heads underneath this water and look at what we don't know. And that's what the Avial Foundation is here to do. We're funding neuroscience and public health research to understand the pathologies that go on inside the brain and how that equates to the behaviors that we see in the outside world. And we need your help to champion this cause, the brain health cause, to prevent violence and build compassion. Please visit us online at our website at www.avialfoundation.org and donate if you can afford to do so. If you shop online, consider going to smile.amazon.com, and they'll donate a portion of your proceeds to the AVL Foundation if you designate us as your recipient, and that's at no cost to you at all. But most importantly, help us to champion the brain health cause through social media. Find us on Facebook at AVL Foundation, and talk about us on Twitter at hashtag AVI Foundation, AVIE, or hashtag Brain Health, and help us to prevent violence and build compassion.